Hello and welcome to the Healthified Mother episode 11. My name is Corey and this is my lovely wife, Christy. So today, on today's episode, we're discussing sleep, putting newborns to sleep, how we as a family of 10 children have what we've learned about putting our kids to sleep and helping kids sleep through the night.
It has been quite a journey. I like to avoid the word sleep training because it has kind of a negative connotation, although I believe there's a lot of gentle and great ways to sleep train your child. But there have been studies that show that, parents who let their baby just cry for hours through the night, have like these disorders and they can't self-regulate, and there's all sorts of things, and so we're not promoting any of that, but I feel like there is a place for sleep training, and that's just helping your child to learn to sleep through the night, and you can do that in a really gentle and fantastic way that they appreciate and that the parents appreciate. So with our first baby, we did not know how to get him to sleep through the night. We'd rock him to sleep, we'd hold him, we'd gently set him down, he'd wake up and oh no, start the whole process over again. I was feeding him 3 or 4 times a night. And when he was 9 months old, I went to visit my sister, and she put her baby down for a nap. She just walked in the room, set her baby down. I think she had a pacifier bottle or something. Anyway, the baby just took her blanket, put it up by her face, and went to sleep. She didn't cry. She didn't fuss. She just oh, this is what you do at nap time. And I was dumbfounded, and I'm like, how did you get your baby to do that? My son does not do that. And I was like, does she do that at night too? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, whoa, tell me your magic. And she gave me the book Baby Wise. And I don't really endorse that book because there's a lot of stuff in that book that I totally disagree with. It's so regimented. You have to do all of these little routines and schedules and things. But there were some things I learned from the book, and we have kind of modified and applied some of the things, and it's worked really well. So we did not start putting, into place some rigid schedule, and a lot of parents do. And that's okay with maybe your first or your second kid, but at some point, your kids can't rule your life. I have friends who are first-time parents, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't go to church during this time because that's when my baby's nap time is. Or I can't, run to this thing, or I can't go to that birthday party, or I can't go to, all these things. It's like they have no social life. They have no ability to do things that they want to do and need to do because the baby sleeps during that time, or the baby eats during that time. And it's just it just doesn't work for a large family. Your baby has to learn to sleep around your schedule, not you change your entire life so that your baby has their perfect 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is, right? So we were maybe a little more into the baby's schedule and stuff than we are now. But even with our first kid, I think because I grew up in a large family, we were like, no, we're not going to change our whole life around for the baby's sleep schedule. But we did start implementing the final feeding around 10 or 11 at night. And then if the baby woke up, Daddy would go in and help baby instead of mom, because Daddy can't feed the baby. And I would like cave every time. Like, baby's crying. They must be starving. Like, okay, I know mentally that's not true, but like emotionally, when you're tired, it's late at night, like it's just very hard to do that. So I'm not saying if dad's not involved that this won't work. You just have to be strong, mom. So anyway, because I had a willing husband, he would go in at night and calm the baby, rock him, hold him, put him back down, shush him, give him a binky, and then walk out. If the baby cried, he'd go back in, calm the baby, etc. And the first night was horrible. You can probably tell the story better than me, but it was a, I wouldn't say it was a disaster, but it was like, I don't know about how this is going to work because he is just not having any.
Are you talking about the first time we did followed Baby Wise?
Yeah, with David, like the very first night.
Well, because the hard part was doing. I mean, you put them down, and then you at least, whether they cry or not, you wait a minute, and then you wait a minute, and then pick the baby up and comfort them, and then you wait 2 minutes when the next time you put them down, and then you wait 4 minutes. Like. So it got to the 45-minute mark before David fell asleep that first time. Where, I mean, not just it took 45 minutes, like incrementing up, it took somewhere around, I don't remember, to where setting a timer, like, okay, and he cried for that long until he fell asleep. And then the next night it was like he didn't get past the 30-minute mark, and then the next night, the third night, it was like maybe 10 minutes, and then after that he like learned to sleep.
Mm-hmm. And as a 9-month-old, this wasn't like a newborn thing, but we'd never tried it, right? And I don't think it has ever been like that with any of our babies since.
No.
None of them have.
No, that was definitely the hardest. I mean, hard because he was crying the most, and we didn't know if it was going to work or not, but we were like, well, let's just try it. And yeah, but yeah, I think because also for 9 months we were training him to expect us to come.
Yeah, and not just to expect us to come, but to expect us to hold him, to feed him, to let him sleep on us, so that like shock of like, why are you not doing exactly what you've done in the past? That was hard. And so we've never done that with the other kids because we didn't know any different.
And we were just desperate for sleep because it was, I mean, I just remember laying on the floor at 2 a.m. and David crawling around me doing circles and me sleep. Like I could barely sleep on the floor because every once in a while he'd bump me and wake me up.
Right.
And it was like, this.
And we were just taking turns, like trying to get some sleep, but it was miserable.
Yeah, we were taking turns sleeping while David did whatever he wanted at night.
Yeah.
Nap, wake up, play.
Yeah. So after that, yeah, it was maybe 3 or 4 days, and then he slept great. He went down for naps. He went down at night. He was fine. And he has not, he's almost 15 years old. I have never seen him struggle with self-regulating his emotions. He doesn't feel like mom and dad abandoned me. Oh no, they're not going to come when I call for them. Like, we were there. He knew we were there. He knew we were right outside the door. We were coming back in. We were comforting him. He was able to like, okay, I'm angry and I'm screaming because they're not doing what I want. As a 9-month-old, like, I feel like he was capable of understanding that more than like a newborn. They wouldn't get that. They would just learn, okay, nobody comes when I call. Like, there's no point in crying. And that's not what we want our babies to learn. But as a 9-month-old, David was like, yeah, they're going to come. They're outside the door. Like, I know that. So I'm just going to scream my head off because I'm angry because I don't want to be in my crib and I don't want to sleep. And this is no fun because I'm used to getting to crawl around on the floor and do whatever I want and eat on demand, etc. But after a few nights, he was fine. He was great. And then with every subsequent kid, we've started off at 4 to 7 weeks. As soon as they are able to sleep in their bassinet by themselves, some of the kids, it was a lot harder because we didn't have a space for them. So they were sleeping in our room. Some of them co-slept with us for a while. But they got better at we got better and they got better at, they would sleep through the night better is what I'm trying to say, like not co-sleeping with us. It was easier for me because I would feed the baby and then I would I don't want to have to go put the baby back in their bed, so I'm just going to keep the baby with me. And after a little bit of that, I think it was Gabe who slept with us for maybe 4 or 5 months instead of the 7-week mark. But I wasn't getting any sleep. He didn't really sleep. And even though we didn't really have space for him, we ended up just putting his bassinet right outside our bedroom door in the hallway. And he slept so much better. He wasn't waking up through the night. He'd just go right to sleep. And that, I feel like as soon as we did that, we didn't really have to do any kind of 5 minutes,
Sleep
10
training.
minutes. It was none of that. He just was like, oh, finally I have my own space. I don't hear any breathing. There's no lights on or anything. And he just slept through the night. It was like he didn't really want to be in our bed. So that was just laziness on my part, right? And he slept through the night 7 or 8 hours, right? And I've seen a lot of people ask questions or online, they'll ask how do you get your baby to sleep through the night? My baby should be sleeping 12 hours. What's wrong? Why is my baby not sleeping 12 hours? And I'm like, whose baby sleeps 12 hours straight? I've had 10 kids. Not one of them has ever slept 12 hours straight. They do need about 12 hours of sleep at night, but they're going to have some kind of feeding or something in that time. You're not going to have 12 full hours of your baby sleeping through the night. Not going to happen. And these parents are putting their kid down at 7 o'clock at night and expecting them to sleep 12 hours. Well, my kid is waking up at 5 a.m. I don't know why. Maybe because you're putting them down too early and you're expecting them to sleep for 12 straight hours, right? So understanding
Unrealistic expectations.
yeah, understanding what's real, what you can really expect, what's a real expectation, I think is really important. And 7 or 8 hours without a feed, with uninterrupted sleep, that's realistic. That is what we have been able to have with most of our kids. There's going to be some setbacks. Maybe they're teething, maybe they're sick, whatever. Fine. But in general, they'll get about 7 or 8 hours of sleep between a feeding or a diaper change or something, right? So having a baby monitor so you can hear them, I think that's great. I personally do not use the video monitors. Some moms are super anxious about their baby and they have a video monitor, they have a heart rate monitor, they have all the monitors. And I feel like that just makes the mom more anxious. Baby doesn't sleep as well. Mom doesn't sleep as well. And mom's constantly panicked. My baby's going to die of SIDS, or my baby's going to have this issue. And I have to always be monitoring. And your body can't really fully go into deep REM sleep when you are always on high alert with all those monitors. So that's my personal thoughts and feelings on it. If you want all those monitors, that's fine. But for me, a monitor that I can hear them cry. Okay, baby's crying. Let's go take care of baby's needs. I don't feel a need to have oxygen and a video and all the other things. So, yeah, we have, with all of the kids after David, we have started at a young, very young age, 7 weeks, somewhere around there, sometimes earlier. I don't remember if it was Christian. One of the kids we started at like 4 weeks. As soon as the baby can sleep 7 to 8 hours a night without a feeding, which is generally about 7 weeks, then that's when we start putting them down and letting them sleep in their own space, even if that's in the hallway, which for our twins, it was in the hallway because we didn't have a place for them to be by themselves. They now share a room with their sister. They do great. It's fine. But when they were that little, we didn't want to have them all the way upstairs. So they were just in the hallway. When they cried, we didn't need a monitor. We could hear them right outside the door. We could go comfort the baby, maybe check, see if they need a diaper change, see, why they were crying. Oh, they got, out of their wrap a little bit. They need to be re-swaddled, etc. Right? So that worked really well, and we've been able to get sleep, and they've been able to get sleep, and it hasn't been this like horrible struggle. It hasn't been something that feels like torture for the baby. Like, we aren't just letting them cry for hours. We aren't just letting them learn that when you cry, no one comes for you, no one helps you. Like, that's not cool. But it's also not cool to like lose sleep for a year as parents, and way too many parents, I feel like, are doing that because they feel like there's only one option or the other. I have to sleep train in this really harsh, horrible way, or I just have to deal with it and get no sleep forever. And there is a happy medium. And for us, that happy medium has been gently putting our babies down, giving them that time to recognize we're here, you're safe, we'll be back. It's okay to sleep. Sleep is good. And within 3 or 4 days, that's what they do. And then for the rest of their lives so far, like, again, they're going to have some issues like sick or teething or, whatever. But for the most part, our kids sleep really well. Even now, some of the kids are like really hard to wake when they're asleep. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of want to just talk about the principles that we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I feel is super applicable to this is just to realize, when I think about, because the way we talk about it is, oh, how do you put your baby to sleep? Or how can I put my baby to sleep? Or, and that very verbiage doesn't accurately describe the proper principle of what you're doing, because you can't put your baby to sleep. In fact, the baby can't put himself to sleep, because I don't put myself to sleep. When I want to go to sleep, I don't put myself to sleep. It's like putting myself to sleep. Like, sleeping isn't a verb of something that I can do. Like, I can stand up from this chair and jump. It's sleep is like a state of mind that happens to us. And I think that's an important principle to realize, is the babies don't put themselves to sleep, and neither do you put your babies to sleep. You are, the principle is, you're trying to put your baby in a situation where they can more easily fall asleep.
Yeah.
Like, they can fall asleep. They can let themselves, they're comfortable, they're relaxed, they're, not hungry. And you cover all these bases, and then then they're able to more easily fall asleep. And obviously there's a great deal. Another principle in my mind is, you know, habits, right? Like we fall asleep, we have a routine. Like, you know, we lay in bed. Some people read. Some people do whatever. You turn the light off. You fluff your pillow just right. You get in the normal position for yourself, whatever position you get in, and then you close your eyes, and then you just lay there, and until you fall asleep, right? So, you know, having that's is there another principle you can think of off the top of your head of around this topic? So
Yeah,
having
well,
habits, you know, consistent method of so that the child comes to recognize, you know, what's going to happen next
mhm.
through
Yeah,
routines.
there's like sleep cues and things. You can tell when the baby's tired, um, and you can help the baby to recognize those sleep cues on their own. For us, we always gave our baby a binky. They slept better, except for Owen. He refused a binky. He sucked these two fingers, and um, that has been a rough habit to break. But we tried. He was sucking them in the womb, like in his ultrasound pictures. Like we have a picture of him with his fingers in his mouth, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah, he would spit the binky out every time and put his fingers in.
yeah. And so it was like, all right, well, that's kind of futile. But every other baby slept better with a binky. So if they were swaddled, if they had a binky, if they had like certain cues that they knew, okay, the lights were off, some white noise worked well for some of our kids. And those sleep cues let them know, okay, it's safe and it's time to sleep. And they just close their eyes, go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
And I've never had a kid that was resistant, like, oh no, oh no, oh no, it's sleep time, and fighting it or resisting it.
I mean, a little
Um,
bit, a little. Sometimes, you know, it's
Sometimes at nap time, but I don't feel like at nighttime. I don't
I
know.
mean, the twins, like when they realize, I feel like when they're toddlers, and I'm putting them to sleep, they initially are like, no, they're tired, but they don't want
Right.
to consciously go to bed yet.
Right.
And but as soon as they're in bed, they'll fall asleep super fast because they are tired.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's true for toddlers. So I was thinking like of infants. Like for toddlers, they want to play more than they want to sleep. And even for, my older kids, some of them are like, "Oh, I don't want to go to bed yet," and they don't want to go to bed because they'd rather play.
Let's break it down then and start out. So we're for our next child, 0 to 6 weeks. What is your plan?
So 0 to 6 weeks, I just kind of feed on demand, make sure the baby has plenty of nutrients. They know they're safe, they're heard, they're comforted.
Co-sleep in the bed.
Um, well, it depends. Like with the twins, it just did not work. We have a queen size bed, two babies in the bed. Like it was impossible. Um, they were
Yeah, so
kicking
they had a
each other.
bassinet that was right next to our bed that they
So
slept in.
yeah, so we had the bassinet, a double bassinet right by our bed. So I usually have the bassinet right by me for about 0 to 7 weeks, somewhere in there. And um, and then after that time, move it out, to a different room, to a nursery, to the hallway, whatever works, right? But with the next child, yeah, like sleeping, just having that routine for myself. Okay, it's 10 o'clock or whatever time I go to bed. That's when the baby goes to bed. And newborns are napping all throughout the day, anyways. And I have never, I won't say I've never let them contact nap where they're sleeping on me. That's okay. But I won't let them get in the habit of I only sleep on mommy, right? And a lot of people do during those first 6 or 7 weeks. I feel like it's really important for the baby to learn that they can sleep in a car seat, they can sleep in their swing, they can sleep in a bassinet, they can sleep, wherever, so that they don't feel like I can only sleep when I'm feeling the warmth of mommy and her heartbeat and whatever. Because if you get into that habit, baby only wants to sleep on you,
Then you
and
have to break the habit.
then you have to break the habit, and it's
or
so
live with it, right? A bad habit, you either have to break the habit or live with it.
right. And so then you're the parent that's driving around the block at 3 o'clock in the morning, because the only way your baby will sleep is in their car seat with the car running and the motor and all of that. And like
driving on the streets with the bumps.
Yeah, I'm just not the kind of parent who's going to let my kid rule my life, and I'm going to be miserable because I have to do whatever baby wants. Like, no.
I did do that once with the twins. It was late. I don't remember how old they were. Do you remember how old they were when I was like, oh my gosh, these guys will not fall asleep. So I put them in the car seats, got in the car, and drove around.
Yeah,
it was more than a block. It was like 20 minutes that I was driving, and came back and brought them inside.
And they were probably 3 or 4 months, and I think they were either teething or sick, because they had already been sleeping through the night just fine.
It was a rough night.
It was one of those rough nights where they were just like, I'm not having any of this sleep stuff. And you'll have those, and that's okay. But I'm not going to get into that habit and live like that, right? And so I don't let them
as soon as we were putting them to sleep, we didn't put them in the car seats the next night and me drive. It just went back to this regular routine.
Right, exactly. And so making sure that you have good habits throughout the day, that they know, here's where I nap throughout the day, if that's in their car seat, if that's in a swing, if that's, and I'm not saying like put them down to sleep in their car seat, but like if you're running errands, right, and they sleep in their car seat when you're out and about, like, okay, but I don't put my baby to sleep in a car seat unless we are traveling and we have no other form of them sleeping, like in the airport, whatever. Okay. So making sure they know my bassinet is a safe place. This is where I sleep. My crib, my swing, whatever it is, right? And then after that initial 4 to 6 weeks where they're learning, to eat, to sleep, to have awake time, to have some play time, and then to follow those cues. And now it's sleep time. We swaddle you. We give you a binky. Your diaper is fresh, etc. They start to understand those cues, and okay, now it's sleep time. By the time they are 7, or and it depends on.
Well, before you move on too, like, it is a thing that when a baby's born, they tend to be awake, like in the womb, right? They're awake at night and asleep during the day.
Yeah.
And that's a routine that they're born with, typically, that in that 4 to 6 week period of them first being born, you're weaning them of that habit.
You're kind of re-establishing like a new schedule for them, right? Yeah. And it can take that 4 to 6 weeks to get them on a schedule where nighttime is where you sleep, not where you're awake.
And the feeding, I think, I feel like when you feed them and it helps them sleep, like that's one of your methods from my perspective in those first 4 to 6 weeks of like training them to sleep at night, is just by feeding them. Whenever they wake up, you feed them and they fall right back to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's good. That in fact, your milk is producing sleep inducing
hormones.
Yes. And some moms that pump, if they pump at night, they'll label their milk like night milk and day milk, because they don't want to give their baby milk
in the daytime, the sleepy stuff.
And since I don't really pump much, like I did only with one child that was when I was student teaching. Other than that, I didn't. And I didn't really pump in the night because I only pumped in the daytime while I was away at work. So I haven't had that issue, but yes, it does create hormones and stuff. So it is important to make sure you distinguish that. But
so then the biggest transition, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I have made sure that the baby is, sleeping, understands when it's daytime, when it's nighttime, and that they feel full. And that can be something that's important is your child may not be ready at 7 weeks. If you're not producing enough milk, you might have to supplement or something so that they can sleep through the night. They have a full tummy, etc. And that was the struggle with the twins is I couldn't produce enough for them. So we had to supplement with something, and I didn't feel comfortable supplementing with formula because there's so many brands of formula. There's so many ingredients in formula, and it feels like all the time they're coming out with new reports of like, this formula has arsenic from China. This formula is ground up like.
And like you wouldn't find out about it for till years are past, right? Like that's
yeah. And so I'm like, I just didn't like. I almost went with this like goat formula, but I just didn't feel good about it. And I read one of Medical Medium's blogs, and he recommended just avocado, banana, and water. And I was like, okay, great. And we used that for a while after the twins were, I don't know, maybe were they 4 or 5 months? They didn't like it just plain anymore. They wanted it a little sweeter. So we added some pure maple syrup to that. And they are still at 14 months. They'll have 1 or 2 bottles of, it's kind of like a banana avocado smoothie, right? And we did that.
And especially at night, it helps them fall asleep.
Yeah.
We give it to them right before bed.
And that was really helpful because I've never been an overproducer of milk. I've always had just enough for my babies. And with twins, it was like
half as much as you needed.
Yeah. So that took a little bit more time, and figuring out that and helping them get adjusted to those bottles and stuff. But then they did great. Like they'd have their bottle, and then when we were done feeding them their bottle, they would go to sleep. So I'd feed them first, then we'd feed them a bottle, and then they'd go to sleep. So it was just like one extra step. But if they're getting enough, if you're producing enough and you know that the baby is getting enough, or if you need to give them formula, whatever, figure out that, and then they should be able to sleep through the night. But if they're continually waking and they're hungry and you can tell that, then you might need to supplement or, do an extra feeding or whatever if they really can't sleep through the night.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely not the hard and fast rule type. I mean, for example, the twins, you were feeding because you felt it was more valuable to breastfeed them as much as possible. You didn't stop at 7 weeks. I don't remember how many weeks it was.
Yeah,
You were still feeding them at night, just because
feeding at night.
You wanted to give them as much milk as possible that you made.
Yeah, I wasn't doing on-demand feeding like 4 or 5 times, right? But I would do like one nighttime feeding, and if one twin woke up, I was gonna, doesn't matter, I'm gonna feed that twin and wake the other one and feed that twin, because I was not gonna like go back downstairs just for 20 minutes later, the next twin wake up and feed them, right? So yeah, because I wasn't producing a ton, I felt like nutrition wise, it would be important for them to get that extra nightly feed.
So I just say that because like whatever circumstances you're in, like we modify based on circumstances.
But for the other kids, they could sleep through the night without an extra feeding. So
after 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks,
and they would go 7 or 8 hours a night without a feeding. And the first time they do that, you think, oh my gosh, did my baby die? I can't believe I slept 7 hours or 8 hours, and your baby's there and they're fine. And you're like, wow, I could get used to this, right? And every time, it doesn't matter how many kids I've had, every time I have this freak out moment where I'm like, the baby hasn't woke up and it's been, like 7 or 8 hours. And I'm like, oh, good. Okay. They're ready for this, right? And it's usually just right around that 7 or 8 weeks, and it takes a couple nights, but on the third or fourth night when they sleep through it, it feels like, did that just happen? Wow. And it's a little freaky, but once you have ascertained that they are alive and that they are well, it's liberating. So, yeah. So after the 6 to 8 weeks, somewhere 4 or 6, 8 weeks, however, for your child
Situation.
in situation, they will sleep really well, and then they sometimes have a little bit of a
Well, and that transition, that's the hardest transition to go, having them sleep in a separate room, and then they're going to learn to sleep through the night and not get fed. Like that's the difficult transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like what we've learned to do is rather than like learning to do more, we've learned to do less, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's making sure the baby, when you put them down, is they're happy, they're comfortable, they're relaxed, they're fed, diapers changed, all their needs are met, and lay them down. And that's uh like, we're not hard and fast about the doubling time like Baby Wise recommends. Like, we don't really do that anymore. But as they're learning to go to sleep on their own in a separate space, we do let them cry a bit, right? Like, not for 45 minutes,
Yeah.
but we do let them cry a bit just before we go back in and start the process over again and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we don't need to check their diaper every 5 minutes, but
Right.
sometimes, because sometimes they,
Yes, especially when they're really young, they really pee a lot. But checking their diaper, making sure, and it was interesting with the twins because one of the twins like wanted to be picked up and held and comforted, and the other one you could just put your hand on their back and like comfort them and they'd go back to sleep. Difference of, so different kids, different styles, and whatever works for that baby, like figure it out. Use your mother's intuition, your parenting intuition to decide, like, hey, this baby needs a little more, this baby needs a little less.
I mean,
Feel like,
I've definitely learned that what worked, in terms of comforting method, what worked for somebody else, and even what worked for your previous children, has nothing to do with what's going to work for your current child you're trying to help sleep. They
yeah,
have you have to discover. It's something you have to discover, like what comforts them, what brings them the most comfort and helps them relax the most. You have to
and some
discover.
things that have worked: singing, white noise, binkies, swaddling, um, like darkness. Like, we had one baby who hated the dark and had to have a little light on. Maybe a couple of babies that were like that, and one baby, and I want to say Christian, but it might have been Gabe. Anyway, oh, you disappeared.
I'm back.
Anyway, one of our babies did not want to sleep with any light on. So if it was not pitch black, baby was not going to sleep. And we had like a bathroom light that, it was just like a night light that was always on in the bathroom. And if we didn't close the bathroom door, he would not sleep because he wanted it to be pitch black. And you just don't know what is going to, you keep disappearing.
I think it's the internet just hiccuping.
Anyway, you just don't know what is going to happen, what is going to work for each baby. So you try different things, and that's fine. But once you figure out for your child what works, it doesn't have to be weeks and weeks or months and months of experimentation. It can just be, with a few days of trying different things, experimenting. learning what that particular child wants. But I think that one of the principles is, like you said, setting up an environment that allows the baby to sleep and not trying to control the baby and put the baby to sleep and make the baby sleep. And that's what we did wrong with, I consider wrong with David, is we were like trying to control how he slept. So we let him sleep on us, or we would rock him to sleep, or, shush him to sleep. And if he cried for even a second, we'd pick him back up. Oh no. And we'd start the whole process over again. And it was just ridiculous and miserable. And it was like, he didn't enjoy it. He didn't know how to fall asleep on his own. And so it was just this crazy sleepless process for all of us. And I don't think that that's actually healthy for him or the parents. And I feel like a lot of parents end up resenting their kids, or they don't want to have more than one kid because their first experience was so miserable that they don't want to repeat that. And so I do get a lot of questions like, how do you do it with 10 kids? Well, you have to learn some of these tips and tricks, or like I would look like sunken eyes, my, all gray hairs. Like, I feel like it would be
you'd be an
horrible.
insomniac.
Yeah. And you can't do that. And so if you're going to have 10 kids, you're going to have to learn some, management skills for how to work with, like, that was helpful as a teacher. I'd already learned classroom management skills. I put those to use in raising my kids. Like, okay, guys, everybody listen up. Okay, I'm not talking until you're silent. There were a lot of different tips that I brought over from a teacher into my parenting that was super helpful, and has allowed me to raise a large brood that I would not if I was trying to control every single little thing that my kids did. Impossible. Can't do it. So when people are like, I'm struggling with 2, I'm like, well, yeah, I was struggling with 2. The more kids I had, the more things I had to let go of. The more things I had to just say, I can't control all of that. I don't need to control all of that. And I've taught my kids to be more independent. Go get your own cup of water. I don't have to go to the cupboard and get a cup every time. Like, push a chair over, climb up, grab a cup. Like, they're learning.
That's I think that's a principle that we apply to our kids sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to put yourself to sleep. Like, learn to fall asleep yourself. Like, yeah, we I don't think laissez-faire is the right word for it, but it's kind of like that, where we try to be consistent in what we do in allowing our children to sleep and allowing them to be in the perfect state, as perfect as we can make it, so that they can let themselves fall asleep and learn to do that. And I think so that's a principle as well, like consistency. Like parents, I feel like parents who are not succeeding in this area, and they talk about how they've tried everything, and it's like, well, the consistency might be one problem. If you're constantly trying new things, it's like that doesn't bring any consistency into their life around sleep.
Yeah, and that is huge, is consistency. Like, pick a method, stick with it for a week at least, before you say, it doesn't work, I've tried. Well, if you tried this one night and you tried that another night and you tried something else a different night, your kid's never going to learn.
Or if you try one method and then you're like, well, it didn't work, and so you're going to try the same method but modify it, and you're like,
right.
You're constantly
There's
trying.
no consistency, so the child is like getting mixed signals, mixed messages. They don't know what to expect, etc. So like, consistency is super important, super key. Whether that's like the consistency of 9 o'clock is bedtime, or the consistency of you swaddle the baby, or the consistency of you turn on the white noise, or whatever it is. Like, those things need to be consistent, or the baby doesn't know what to expect, doesn't know what's safe, doesn't know what cues to recognize to, oh, this is sleep time, right? If that's
Now
changing all the time.
here's another thing. In my experience, we swaddle when they're newborns, right? And gotten very good with swaddling, but I feel like there's another transition when they're like so strong, they just get their or wiggly, they know how to get their arms out, and like no matter how well you swaddle them, they just get their arms out. That's a whole a step of them having to learn. It's like, okay, we're just not going to swaddle anymore, and they have to, this transition period of learning to sleep with their arms free.
And that's about 3 or 4 months old. Sometimes I feel like the twins, we were able to swaddle them longer, and they were happy with that, and they wanted that. But most of our kids, like 3 or 4 months, and they were kind of done with the swaddle. I think it was like 6 months whenever we transitioned them out of the bassinet. But they also didn't roll over forever. Like, they took a really long time to roll over. Most of our kids roll over at like 5 months, 4 or 5 months. And I think they were like 7 months before they were really rolling from front to back and pushing themselves up and trying to crawl or anything. So there, they would be in their little swaddle, and I don't ever remember, even up to, I think 6 months, maybe it was 7 months, they never, like, we didn't find them on their stomach. Like, we put them down on their back, and then they didn't do that. And so some kids, like, they are out of a swaddle at 3 or 4 months because they're already rolling over, and that wasn't with the case with the twins. So it just depends on your baby, like when they're going to be out of the swaddle, when they're too long for it, when they're too wiggly for it, when they're too rolly.
And for me, this, like, we get rid of the swaddle because it becomes a hindrance to where it wakes them up as they're like, no, I'm going to get out of this. And then they wake themselves up getting out. And so it's like, why, it's just going to be a reason for them to wake up and cry. So we don't even swaddle them anymore.
Yeah. And so that transition, that might be another night or two transition where, okay, no swaddle. So now new sleep routine. We don't swaddle you, but you still have the other things, and they learn, okay, I can go to sleep without a swaddle. It's new, but it's still safe. I can do this.
I mean, like, we'll put the blanket on them, give them the binky, make sure they're comfortable.
Right.
And
and some kids, like, they don't want anything to do with a blankie. Like, get out of here, And other kids, like, they want that blanket right up by their face. And some parents are like totally anti, you can only have a sheet and warm pajamas. Whatever works for you. For us, we have never had any issue with baby, with suffocation, with baby not being able to move blankets off of themselves and whatever. So that hasn't been a concern for us. But some parents just do a really warm sleeper or pajamas and only one plain sheet, and that's fine. However it works for you. But we've had kids who they would just not sleep without some kind of blanket or, whatever up by their face. And other kids, like, they didn't care. They would sleep up on with their little bum sticking up in the air and like all sorts of different positions. So that's fine, whatever your kid does, as long as it's consistent, as long as they feel like safe and that they can sleep that way. Great. Let them sleep. And I've had people ask questions like, should I wake my child in the middle of the night to feed them when they're young? If your kid is sleeping through the night and not waking up for a feeding, great. Then they're capable of sleeping through the night. Don't wake them up for a feeding. If they'll be fine. If they are hungry enough, they'll wake up on their own. Trust me. Like, They definitely wake up when they're hungry. And I've had other people, like wake their kids like, well, should I wake my kid to change their diaper? Should I wake my kid to, I don't know, for whatever reasons they have. And I'm like, no, don't mess with a schedule. Like however they are self-regulating, let that be your guide to follow their cues, right? If they are sleeping through the night, let them sleep through the night. There's no need to go in and wake them. There's no need to go in and do, like change them, whatever. If they're wet and they're crying, like they'll let you know that. Like, I don't like a wet diaper. I've had several babies that as soon as they pee, they let me know. Like, I do not want to be in this diaper. And I've had others who like, they'd sit in a poopy for 4 hours if I didn't smell it. They don't care. And others, like the second they just have a tiny, tiny blue line on their diaper, they're screaming and crying. Get me out of this. So follow their cues. I mean, I'm not saying like let them be in a poopy for hours. If you don't notice, that's one thing. But if you notice and you're aware of it, like change their poopy. Even if they don't care, it's going to give them a rash, right? But follow their cues. Don't try to manipulate and control like all these little schedules and things, because it just
Yeah, I think that's another foundational principle is like learn to observe your child's cues. Like each child has their own way of being that they come into this world with, and you get to discover it and then work with it. And you literally can't change it. I mean, I guess like technically you probably could, but not without a lot of like with Owen and his sucking his fingers. We tried for a little bit, but then we realized like it's a losing battle. It's gonna make it way worse. We'll have to make his life and our life way worse to get him to not do it. Like tying his arms down basically, and then because he wouldn't hold on to a binky, and it would have been like we literally would have had to have tied his arms down so he couldn't do it. And we were just so learning to observe their own cues and letting them express their own personality around these things.
You wouldn't want to change their personality, right? So sure, you could change their personality with abuse, with whatever, like it's possible, but why would you want to do that? Like let them be themselves, let them express themselves, let them, follow those cues. And like I feel like that's freeing.
Like Owen is how old, and we're like, okay, now we're like, okay, Owen, you're old enough. We're gonna try and teach you to not do that specifically, because walking around like this,
5 years old, 6 years old, it's embarrassing for him, or like it's just not a good habit. So yeah, but as a baby, like we didn't feel with that fight that we wanted to fight. It's okay.
Another issue that I want to cover is, so what about wake ups in the night? Like how do we handle and I feel like with the twins it was especially advantageous. This was the farthest away we'd ever had the babies. I think it's been an advantage that they're so far away. Like it's not like, I mean, it's upstairs, we're downstairs, their babies are upstairs, so they're like, we don't just, as soon as they wake up and cry, we're like right there.
Yeah, sometimes by the time you got up the stairs, they weren't crying anymore, and
they're already asleep.
They'd fallen back asleep, right? So we'd wait a little bit and see, okay, are they gonna fall back asleep? No, they're still crying. Okay, head up the stairs.
I don't think it's been more than 2 or 3 times that I've made it all the way to their cribs and had to deal with them, helping them get back to sleep. Just that's been super.
Yeah, and almost
the patience. Even though we wake up because we can hear them, we wake up when they cry. We don't immediately rush to their side, because 9 times out of 10 or more, they just put themselves back to sleep.
Right, and most of the time when they don't, probably every time, it's because they had a wet diaper or a poopy diaper almost every
Or were
time.
sick, or something else was going on.
Yeah, but even then, like, I feel like changing their diaper was the first thing I would check. And almost every time it was wet. And that was what woke them, even if they were sick or whatever, right? Like, it wasn't being sick that woke them. It was like the wet diaper or the poopy
And
diaper.
so we just changed, take care of whatever needs to be taken care of, and then put them right back down to sleep. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't turn on the lights. We don't have, playtime. Like, keep the mood calm, quiet, it's sleepy time, put baby back to bed. And even if they don't fall asleep immediately,
whatever routine you use to put them to sleep initially, like that same routine.
Yeah.
For that.
Right. And I think that's really, really key is, be patient. You don't have to always rush to their side. Like, they may just be rearranging, like, oh, my arm is numb. I'm going to switch, to the other side, whatever it is. Right. And
something woke them up, but they're,
yeah.
If it's
And
not,
sometimes,
if it's not a wet diaper or whatever, like, and they just put themselves right back to sleep,
right.
It's a big relief to hear, you hear them crying for 2 or 3 minutes, and then they stop and they go back to sleep, and you're like, oh, I didn't have to get out of bed. That's nice.
Yeah. And I think about how many times I wake up in the middle of the night and just need to adjust positions. And I don't cry, but sometimes I need to just go to the bathroom, or I need to just lay there. And sometimes I can't go back to sleep, and I just sit there and think about everything I need to do the next day or whatever. And then I eventually fall back asleep. And that's important for the babies to learn how to do that themselves, right? If you rushed to my side and tried to stroke my hair and put me back to sleep, like, annoying. And also, like, I don't think it would be helpful, right? I think it would make me more awake and like overstimulated, right? So just allowing them to figure out, okay, I need to adjust positions, or I'm awake, okay, I'm gonna fall back asleep, nothing's wrong, there's no reason for me to be, crying, whatever. And if there is a reason, they let us know, because they keep crying and we go check them, and that's their diaper, or that's whatever it is, right? So
That's what I think when I say we've learned to do less, because I think the principle that I mean to express there is whatever we bring to the table in terms of attitude and emotion around sleep, it's kind of the baby adopts that, through osmosis. Like, if we have a lot of anxiety around them going to sleep, like, the baby is going to feel your anxiety and absorb it. And so that's one thing just to be aware of, like, you can have an emotion, and even though they're an infant and they could be 2 weeks old, like, they can absorb your emotions and feel it, and that could be a hindrance to their falling asleep, because how easy is it for you to fall asleep when you're super anxious?
yeah. And I think that's important. One thing we've done is, during nap time and stuff, we have a big family, and we have never been like silent. Like, everybody be quiet, the baby's sleeping. Like, our house can be so noisy, and the baby sleeps right through it, in their swing, in their bassinet, in their crib, whatever. If everybody like leaves the house and goes for a walk or something, not saying we leave the baby alone, like, let's say I'm still in the house and I'm like making dinner or something, and the baby's napping, as soon as it gets quiet, baby's awake, right? Like, whoa, this is new. Like, how come it's so quiet? Because they've learned to sleep with all that noise, right? And I was one of 9 kids, and I learned to sleep with a lot of noise. And people, like, in college, there were times where I was just asleep in the library, in a little cubby, like, just put my head down on my books and fell asleep. And people are like, how can you fall asleep with all these people around, with, all this noise and stuff? Because this wasn't I don't know, at least this part of the library was not like the quiet part of the library. And I was able to sleep through all of that noise because I had learned as a child, like, it doesn't matter how much is going around you, you can just fall asleep if you're that tired, you can sleep through anything. So that's another thing is we're not super particular about quiet, like at least during the day. Like at night, everyone's sleeping, yeah, it's quiet. But during the day, during nap time, we're not like everybody has to walk around on eggshells and be super quiet because we don't want the baby to wake up. Like if the baby wakes up during the day, okay, they're done with their nap. And maybe they'll take another nap in 20 minutes because they're a newborn and that's just what they do, right? Like, and they learn to sleep, and maybe they sleep for 2 or 3 hours at a time with all that noise going on because they learn to do that right away. So yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
lots of things that we've learned over the years. And just to recap, set a good environment, have a good setup, a good environment set up for the baby to learn what's safe, what his or her sleep cues are, and then put the baby down at a specific time. I feel like later is better. Unless you're someone who wants to be up at 4 or 5 in the morning, like put your kid down at like 9 to 11 for their final feed. Don't start them at 6 or 7. Like you're going to have a kid waking up way early in the middle of the night and you're not going to like it. So put them down for their final feed at, somewhere between 9 and 11 if you want them to sleep until 7 or 8 in the morning, right? And if you're an early riser and you're up and going to the gym at 4 a.m., then great, put your kid down at 6. Fine. But if you're not, then don't put your kid down super early. And then have a consistent routine when you're first learning they're first learning and you're trying to help them learn to go to sleep on their own. Comfort them, put them down. If they cry, go in, comfort them again. If they cry after that, wait 1 minute, go in, comfort them, etc. Come back out. If they cry again, go back in, comfort them, etc. And you just repeat that in 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, whatever minute intervals. I do not like to, and you might have a different opinion, but I do not like to go past 5-minute intervals. And usually that's maybe one night, maybe 2 nights if they're particularly upset or they're a little older, like with David, when we just didn't learn how to do it at a very young age, right? But
I feel like when you do it when they're super young and you're right on top of it, yeah, it doesn't take more than that. And I think it took that long because David had all these bad habits, and we got rid of all of them at once. Like
right.
in 4 days, we like erased his bad habits and got him a new sleep schedule, and it was rough for both of us, all
Right.
3 of us.
Yeah, and so it's not something like I would recommend, like, yeah, just, go all the way to these 30 or 45-minute intervals. No, I feel like 5 minutes is kind of the max. And that might be 5 minutes, and then you go in and you comfort them and whatever, and they fall asleep. And they wake up again, and it might be another 5 minutes, and it might be several of those throughout the night, the first 1 or 2 nights. But after that, you're not going to have, you probably won't even get up to a 5-minute interval. So do what feels right for you. Don't feel like,
Because every child is unique.
yeah,
And every situation is unique, and all 10 of ours have been different situations, and we've adapted. So
right. But we
yeah.
followed these general guidelines and these general principles, and they've worked well for us, and they've slept through the night, and we haven't had, sleepless nights for 15 years because we're letting our babies take over, our lives. And they are happy, we're happy, everybody gets
I mean,
a good
every
time.
once in a while there'll be a night where like kids get sick and we're up cleaning things, but those are the rare occasions. And typically, when everyone's asleep, we all sleep for 8 hours.
Yeah, yeah. And we've had some kids as they get a little older, maybe 6, 7, 13, whatever, have a bout of insomnia here and there. And we've learned to manage that with different techniques and things. And, you know, that.
Or they hit an age where all of a sudden they're like scared to go to sleep, and
Right.
when they're older.
That's fine. We've learned, let them scribble, get that energy out, get that anxiety out. Maybe they've done some tapping exercises. I can
And again,
sleep.
it's about
I'm not
it's
afraid.
about okay, they need a new method of calming themselves down, because if they're feeling anxiety, it's super hard to fall asleep. You got to find a new method
Right.
to reach that calm, relaxed state.
Yeah. But I don't feel like we've ever been like tough, just go to sleep. And, I don't feel like that's healthy. I don't encourage that because how well has that worked for you in your life, right? Tough love. Somebody like just just cry yourself to sleep and who cares, You'll learn to sleep on your own, right? Or whatever it is. Like, I know you're scared and you're 13, so you're too old to be scared, so just go to sleep in your room and tough luck, right? Like, I don't feel like that's a healthy, beneficial way to deal with problems in life. And so we have come up with all sorts of different ways to help them and throughout their life. And we're not done. We still have lots more kids and lots more experiences that will be getting to deal with, to experience, to go through. And that's, part of being a parent. So those are our sleep tips and how we have gotten our babies to sleep through the night. And hopefully something in here will help somebody.
I mean, we haven't done it perfectly, but we've gotten by and learned to do our best. And I feel like it was helpful, at least to read various books to learn the principles of around sleep. And even if we don't use those methods, it was valuable to, oh, that's how somebody does it. And it obviously worked for somebody once. And, we've just taken out the principles from these sources and applied the principle, not necessarily the exact practice as everyone else or as the books teach. Thanks for watching, and hope your babies sleep well. Bye-bye.